In the heart of bustling New York City, where skyscrapers pierced the clouds and ambition filled the air, there lived a woman named Claire Bennett. Claire wasn't just any woman. She was a force to be reckoned with. As the CEO of one of the world's largest tech companies, she had earned her reputation as someone who demanded excellence from herself and everyone around her. Her days were packed with meetings, decisions that could shape industries, and constant travel across continents. But despite her busy schedule, Claire always carried an aura of calm confidence. She knew what she wanted, and she expected nothing less than perfection. On this particular morning, Claire stood in her penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park. The sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden hues across the sleek furniture. She adjusted her navy blue suit jacket in the mirror, smoothing out imaginary wrinkles. Today was going to be a big day, or so she thought. Just hours earlier, she had finalized a multi-billion-dollar acquisition deal that would solidify her company's dominance in the global market. It was a victory worth celebrating, but Claire didn't have time for celebrations. Instead, she grabbed her leather briefcase, slid on her heels, and headed out the door. The drive to John F. Kennedy International Airport was quick, thanks to her chauffeur who navigated the streets with practiced ease. Claire spent the ride reviewing documents on her tablet, occasionally jotting down notes in her planner. Her mind was already racing ahead to the next meeting, which awaited her in London. This trip wasn't supposed to be anything special, a routine flight in first class, a few hours of rest, and then back to work. Little did she know this journey would turn into something far more eventful. When Claire arrived at the airport, she breezed through security with the kind of efficiency that came from years of frequent flying. Her platinum membership card granted her access to the exclusive lounge, where she sipped a cup of black coffee while scrolling through emails. Around her, other travelers lounged on plush chairs, some chatting quietly, others typing furiously on laptops. Claire barely noticed them. She was too focused on preparing for her upcoming presentation. Finally, it was time to board the flight. Claire walked down the jet bridge with purpose, her presence commanding attention even in the crowded terminal. Stepping onto the plane, she nodded politely at the flight attendants who greeted passengers with practiced smiles. First class was everything you'd expect. Plush seats, ample legroom, and a level of luxury designed to make even the longest flights bearable. Claire settled into her window seat, stowing her bag neatly in the overhead compartment before sitting down. She exhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the day begin to lift ever so slightly. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Claire leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes for a moment. For the first time all day, she allowed herself to relax, if only briefly. The hum of the engines grew louder as the aircraft prepared for takeoff. Outside the window, the cityscape blurred into streaks of light as they ascended into the sky. Claire opened her eyes, gazing at the clouds rolling past. She loved this part of flying, the moment when the world below faded away, leaving only the vastness of the sky ahead. It was peaceful, almost meditative. But peace is often fleeting, especially for someone like Claire. Not long after reaching cruising altitude, a cheerful flight attendant approached her with a warm smile. "Good evening, ma'am," the attendant said brightly, holding a menu card adorned with glossy images of gourmet dishes. "Would you care to see our first-class dining options?" Claire glanced up, momentarily distracted from her thoughts. She studied the menu briefly, noting the array of carefully curated meals. There were steak dishes, seafood platters, vegetarian options, all designed to cater to the most discerning palates. Yet none of them appealed to her. Claire had strict dietary preferences, ones that rarely aligned with airline menus. Without hesitation, she handed the menu back to the attendant. "Thank you," she said curtly, "but I won't be needing anything." The attendant blinked, clearly taken aback. "Are you sure, ma'am? We can certainly accommodate any specific requests you might have." Her tone was polite but persistent, the kind that suggested she wouldn't take no for an answer easily. Claire frowned, her patience already beginning to wear thin. "I appreciate the offer," she replied, her voice firm, "but I've already declined. Please don't ask again." With that, she turned her head toward the window, signaling the end of the conversation. For a moment, the attendant hesitated, unsure whether to press further or retreat. Eventually, she gave a small nod and moved on to assist other passengers. But Claire couldn't shake the irritation simmering beneath the surface. Why hadn't her simple refusal been enough? Was it really so hard to respect someone's wishes? As the minutes ticked by, Claire tried to focus on the view outside her window, hoping to reclaim the tranquility she'd felt earlier. Yet, the seed of frustration had been planted, and it was growing roots. Unbeknownst to her, this seemingly minor interaction was about to set off a chain of events that would leave both her and the flight crew reeling. What started as a quiet refusal of a meal was about to spiral into something much bigger and far more complicated than anyone could have anticipated. The flight attendant, whose name tag read Emily, stepped away from Claire's seat with a mixture of confusion and determination etched on her face. She had been trained to provide exceptional service, especially in first class where passengers expected nothing short of perfection. To Emily, declining a meal wasn't unusual. Some travelers preferred to sleep, while others brought their own snacks or followed strict diets. But something about Claire's tone had struck a chord. It wasn't just the refusal, it was the finality in her voice, the way she seemed to shut down any further discussion. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she'd somehow failed in her duty to make Claire comfortable. A few moments later, Emily returned, this time accompanied by another flight attendant, a senior member of the crew named Mark. Mark had years of experience dealing with difficult situations mid-flight, and his calm demeanor often helped diffuse tension before it escalated. He approached Claire with a warm smile, holding the same menu card Emily had presented earlier. "Ms. Bennett," he began, his voice smooth and professional, "I understand you've declined our meal service, but I wanted to personally ensure we're meeting your needs. If there's anything specific you'd like, we'd be happy to arrange it for you." Claire's eyes flicked up from the book she had opened moments ago, her expression unreadable. For a brief second, she considered ignoring him altogether, but something stopped her. Perhaps it was the sincerity in his voice or the fact that he addressed her by name, a subtle reminder that she was no ordinary passenger. Still, her patience was wearing thin. "I already told your colleague that I don't want anything," she said, her tone clipped but controlled. "Please respect my decision." Mark nodded slowly, clearly trying to gauge whether pushing further would help or hinder the situation. "Of course, Ms. Bennett," he replied, maintaining his polite demeanor. "We just want to ensure you have the best possible experience during your flight. If you change your mind at any point, don't hesitate to let us know." With that, he backed away, leaving Claire alone once more. For a while, the cabin settled into a quiet rhythm. Passengers sipped champagne, flipped through magazines, or dozed off in their reclined seats. The hum of conversation blended with the soft murmur of the engines, creating a soothing backdrop. Claire tried to immerse herself in her book, a gripping novel she had been meaning to finish for weeks. But every page felt heavier than the last, her focus slipping as irritation simmered beneath the surface. It wasn't long before Emily reappeared, this time without Mark. Her smile was tentative, almost apologetic as she leaned closer to Claire. "Ms. Bennett," she whispered, glancing around to avoid drawing attention, "I just wanted to check if there's anything else I can assist you with. Perhaps a beverage? Or maybe a light snack instead of a full meal?" Claire froze, her fingers tightening around the edge of her book. She hadn't expected them to persist so relentlessly. Didn't they understand what no meant? Setting the book down gently, she turned to face Emily, her gaze sharp and unyielding. "I believe I've made myself clear," she said, her voice low but laced with steel. "I don't want a meal, a snack, or anything else. Please, stop asking me." Emily blinked, caught off guard by the intensity of Claire's response. "I'm sorry if I've caused any inconvenience," she stammered, taking a step back. "It's just, we aim to provide the highest level of service and harassing me isn't part of that service," Claire interrupted, her words cutting through the air like a blade. Several nearby passengers glanced over, curious about the exchange. Claire ignored them, her focus entirely on Emily. "If you truly want to serve me well, then leave me alone. That's all I'm asking," The color drained from Emily's face as she realized the gravity of the situation. Mumbling an apology, she retreated quickly, leaving Claire seething in her seat. The interaction left a bitter taste in her mouth, not because of Emily's intentions, but because of the sheer lack of respect for her wishes. Claire had always prided herself on being decisive, someone who valued clarity and efficiency. Yet here she was repeatedly having to assert herself against people who refused to listen. As the minutes passed, Claire found it increasingly difficult to concentrate. The initial irritation had morphed into outright frustration, gnawing at her composure. She glanced around the cabin, noticing how effortlessly other passengers seemed to enjoy their flights. A man across the aisle chuckled softly as he shared a joke with the flight attendant serving him. A woman 2 rows ahead savored a glass of wine, her expression relaxed and content. Why couldn't her experience be as simple? Her thoughts were interrupted when turbulence hit. The plane jolted slightly, causing a ripple of murmurs throughout the cabin. Flight attendants moved swiftly to secure loose items, their movements efficient but visibly hurried. Claire gripped the armrests instinctively, her knuckles whitening as the aircraft dipped again. While the turbulence wasn't severe, it added another layer of discomfort to an already tense journey. When the shaking subsided, Claire noticed Emily struggling to balance a tray of drinks. One of the glasses tilted precariously, spilling a splash of orange juice onto the carpet. Another passenger sighed audibly, muttering something under their breath about incompetence. Claire watched silently, her earlier anger mingling with a strange sense of pity. These attendants weren't bad people, they were simply doing their jobs, but their inability to read the room was making matters worse. Just as she thought things couldn't get more awkward, a voice from behind broke the silence. Some people are just impossible to please, aren't they? Claire turned sharply, locking eyes with the man seated directly behind her. His tone was casual, almost conversational, but his words carried a pointed edge. He hadn't been speaking to anyone in particular, yet it was clear he was referring to her. Claire's jaw tightened. She could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on her, not just from the man but from others who might have overheard. Without saying a word, she fixed him with a cold stare, her eyes conveying a message far louder than any retort could. The man faltered, his smirk fading as he shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Satisfied, Claire turned back to her window, her resolve hardening. By now, the flight had barely reached its halfway point, but Claire felt as though she'd endured hours of unnecessary drama. Each interaction, each misstep by the crew, had chipped away at her patience until all that remained was a simmering resentment. She knew she wouldn't forget this flight anytime soon, and neither, she suspected, would the airline responsible for it. As the plane continued its steady course across the Atlantic, Claire allowed herself a moment of reflection. Was she being too harsh? Perhaps, but in her mind, the issue wasn't about food or drink. It was about respect. And as someone who demanded excellence from herself and those around her, Claire believed respect was non-negotiable. By the time the wheels touched down in London, she had made up her mind. This wasn't going to end here. As the flight cruised through the night sky, Claire's frustration simmered quietly beneath the surface. The turbulence had subsided, but its effects lingered, not just in the occasional jolt of the plane, but in the growing tension between her and the flight crew. The cabin, once a haven of luxury and calm, now felt suffocating to Claire. Every movement of the attendant seemed exaggerated, every interaction fraught with unease. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, or worse, judged. Emily, the persistent flight attendant who had initially offered the meal service, appeared to be avoiding Claire's section altogether. Instead, Mark took over, his demeanor more cautious this time. He moved through the first-class cabin with practiced precision, ensuring passengers were comfortable without lingering too long at any one seat. When he approached Claire to offer a blanket, a gesture meant to soothe rather than intrude, she accepted it wordlessly, wrapping it around herself like armor. Her silence spoke volumes, and Mark retreated quickly, sensing that further attempts at conversation would only make things worse. The hours dragged on, and the cabin settled into a restless quiet. Most passengers had drifted off to sleep, lulled by the soft hum of the engines and the dimmed lights. But Claire remained wide awake, her mind racing. She replayed the earlier interactions in her head, dissecting each moment for clues about what had gone wrong. Was it her tone? Their inability to take no for an answer? Or was it something deeper, an unspoken clash of expectations? Her thoughts were interrupted when another bout of turbulence struck, this time more pronounced than before. The plane shuddered, causing cups and utensils to rattle on the trays scattered throughout the cabin. A few passengers stirred groggily, while others gripped their armrests tightly, eyes wide with alarm. Claire clenched her jaw, willing herself to stay calm despite the sudden chaos. Amid the commotion, Emily stumbled slightly as she tried to steady, a cart loaded with empty dishes. One of the plates slipped from her grasp, clattering loudly against the floor. The sound echoed through the otherwise hushed cabin, drawing startled glances from nearby passengers. Emily flushed red, apologizing profusely as she scrambled to clean up the mess. Claire watched the scene unfold with a mix of irritation and pity. It wasn't the spill itself that bothered her. It was the sloppiness, the lack of control. Her world, mistakes happened, but they were always followed by swift correction. Here everything felt chaotic, disorganized. The turbulence eventually eased, leaving behind a palpable sense of relief among the passengers. Yet for Claire, the incident only deepened her dissatisfaction. She glanced around the cabin, observing how the crew handled the aftermath. Some attendants worked efficiently, restoring order with quiet professionalism. Others, however, seemed flustered, their movements rushed and clumsy. To Claire, these minor missteps weren't isolated incidents. They were symptoms of a larger problem. If this was the standard of service in first class, what did economy look like? Her musings were cut short when she overheard a snippet of conversation from 2 rows ahead. A middle-aged couple was discussing her, not directly naming her, but it was clear they were talking about the woman who had refused multiple meal offers. Honestly, the man said in a low voice, if I paid for first class, I'd expect them to bend over backward for me, too. His wife nodded in agreement, adding, still, there's no need to be rude about it. Claire stiffened, her hands tightening around the edges of her blanket. Rude? Was that how they saw her? She hadn't raised her voice or used harsh language. She had simply stated her preferences clearly and firmly. Why was that considered rude? The realization stung, not because she cared deeply about strangers' opinions, but because it highlighted a fundamental disconnect. These people, like many others, equated politeness with compliance. They didn't understand that saying no could be both respectful and assertive. Determined to ignore the gossip, Claire turned her attention back to the window. The darkness outside stretched endlessly, dotted only by the occasional flicker of lightning far below. She tried to focus on the beauty of the view, the vastness of the sky, anything to distract herself from the mounting frustration within. But even the stars seemed dimmer tonight, their light obscured by clouds and her own turbulent emotions. Just as she began to drift into a restless sort of meditation, another passenger chimed in. This time it was a younger man seated diagonally across from her, his voice carrying just enough to catch her attention. You know, he remarked casually to his companion. Sometimes people pay for first class just to feel important. Maybe she's one of those types. His tone was teasing, almost playful, but the implication was unmistakable. Claire's blood boiled. How dare he reduce her to some caricature of wealth and entitlement? Did he think she enjoyed arguing with the crew or enduring uncomfortable interactions? For a brief moment, she considered confronting him, setting the record straight. But then she stopped herself. Engaging would only validate his assumptions, giving him exactly what he wanted, a reaction. Instead, she forced herself to breathe deeply, channeling her anger into resolve. By the time the plane landed, everyone involved would know precisely who she was and why crossing her was a mistake. As the flight entered its final stretch, the attendants began preparing the cabin for descent. They distributed landing cards, collected trash, and ensured all loose items were secured. Mark made one last pass through first class, offering bottled water and thanking passengers for flying with them. When he reached Claire, he hesitated, clearly unsure whether to address her directly. Finally, he settled on a generic "thank you for choosing our airline," his words tinged with caution. Claire gave him a curt nod, neither confirming nor denying her satisfaction. Inside, though, her mind was already racing ahead. She knew exactly what she would do once the plane touched down. This wasn't just about a missed meal or a spilled drink. It was about accountability. If the airline couldn't deliver the level of service promised in first class, then someone needed to answer for it. And Claire Bennett wasn't the type to let such matters slide unnoticed. When the captain announced their impending arrival, in London, a collective rustle of activity swept through the cabin. Passengers stretched, adjusted their clothing, and gathered their belongings. Claire remained still, her expression unreadable. Outside the window, the first hints of dawn painted the horizon in shades of pink and gold. The sight should have been breathtaking, a reminder of new beginnings. But for Claire, it marked the start of something else entirely. A reckoning. As the wheels kissed the tarmac at Heathrow Airport, Claire unbuckled her seatbelt with deliberate slowness. She retrieved her bag from the overhead compartment, smoothing out her suit jacket one last time. Her steps were measured as she exited the plane, bypassing the usual pleasantries exchanged between passengers and crew. There was no smile, no nod of gratitude, just purposeful strides toward the terminal, and toward the decision that would soon ripple through the aviation industry. The moment Claire stepped off the plane, she felt a surge of determination course through her veins. The crisp London air greeted her as she walked briskly down the jet bridge, her heels clicking against the tiled floor with authority. Most passengers shuffled toward baggage claim or passport control, eager to begin their journeys in the city. But Claire had no such plans. She bypassed the usual post-flight routines entirely, her mind laser-focused on one thing: holding the airline accountable. Instead of heading to the arrivals hall, Claire made a beeline for the airport's customer service desk. Located near Gate 32, it was a small, unassuming counter tucked away from the bustling crowds. A young representative sat behind the desk, scrolling absently through emails on a computer screen. When Claire approached, the woman looked up, startled by the intensity in Claire's gaze. "I need to speak to your manager," Claire said without preamble, her voice calm but commanding. Immediately, the representative blinked, clearly unprepared for such a direct request. May I ask what this is regarding?" she stammered, glancing nervously at her computer. Claire leaned forward slightly, resting her hands on the edge of the counter. "It's regarding the unacceptable level of service I experienced on Flight 472 from New York. I don't have time to explain it twice, so please fetch your manager now." The young woman hesitated, then nodded quickly and picked up the phone. Within minutes, a middle-aged man in a neatly pressed uniform appeared, his name tag identifying him as Mr. Thompson, the duty manager. His expression was polite but wary as he extended a hand in greeting. "Good morning, Ms. Bennett. How can I assist you?" Claire ignored the handshake, instead fixing him with a steely stare. "Let's take this somewhere private," she said, curtly, gesturing toward the nearby office reserved for customer complaints. Mr. Thompson nodded again, leading her into the small room and closing the door behind them. Inside, Claire wasted no time getting to the point. She recounted every detail of her experience on the flight, the repeated meal offers despite her clear refusal, the clumsiness of the crew during turbulence, and the overall lack of professionalism she had witnessed. Her tone remained measured throughout, but there was an undeniable edge to her words, a quiet fury that left no room for argument. "They didn't just fail to meet my expectations," Claire concluded, leaning back in her chair. "They actively disregarded my wishes and created an environment that was uncomfortable and disrespectful. And let me make something very clear. When you book first class, you're not paying for mediocrity. You're paying for excellence. What I received was anything but." Mr. Thompson listened intently, jotting down notes on a notepad. He seemed genuinely concerned, nodding occasionally, as if to acknowledge the validity of her points. But Claire wasn't here for sympathy, she wanted action. "What would you like us to do, Ms. Bennett?" he asked finally, setting his pen aside. "We take feedback seriously and will ensure this doesn't happen again." Claire's lips curved into a faint smile, though it lacked warmth. "I appreciate your willingness to address the issue," she began, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "But assurances aren't enough. This isn't just about me. It's about setting a standard. If your employees can't handle basic requests without pushing back or making mistakes, then they shouldn't be working in first class, period." She paused, letting her words sink in before delivering her ultimatum. "The entire flight crew responsible for my journey must be fired, every single one of them, effective immediately." Mr. Thompson's eyes widened in shock. "Ms. Bennett, I understand your frustration, but terminating an entire crew is extreme. These are highly trained professionals who—" "Highly trained?" Claire interrupted sharply, slamming her palm against the table for emphasis. "Does highly trained mean repeatedly harassing a passenger after they've said no? Does it mean dropping plates and spilling drinks during turbulence? Because if that's your definition of excellence, then your standards are far too low." Her outburst hung heavy in the air, silencing any attempt at rebuttal. Mr. Thompson shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly torn between defending his team and appeasing one of the airline's most high-profile customers. After a long pause, he cleared his throat and spoke carefully. "While I agree that improvements are necessary, firing the entire crew might not be the best solution. Perhaps additional training or reassignment would suffice." "No, Claire," cut him off firmly. Her patience was wearing thin and she could feel the clock ticking. "This isn't negotiable. Either you fire the crew, or I will personally see to it that this incident becomes public knowledge. Do you understand what that means? Millions of people follow my company online. One tweet from me, and your brand will suffer irreparable damage." "Is that really a risk you're willing to take?" The threat lingered in the air, sharp and unmistakable. Mr. Thompson paled visibly, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. He knew exactly who Claire Bennett was, not just a CEO, but a powerful influencer whose opinions carried weight. Losing her goodwill could cost the airline millions in lost revenue and tarnished reputation. After what felt like an eternity, Mr. Thompson sighed deeply, resignation etched across his face. "Very well, Ms. Bennett, I'll escalate this matter to our headquarters and ensure the appropriate actions are taken. You have my word." Claire nodded once, satisfied with his response. "Good. I expect confirmation of their termination within 24 hours. And remember, I'll be monitoring the situation closely." With that, she stood up, smoothed her jacket, and exited the office without another word. As she walked away, Claire allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. She knew the decision wouldn't sit well with everyone. After all, firing an entire crew over a single complaint was unprecedented. But she also knew it sent a clear message. Mediocrity would not be tolerated. In her world, accountability wasn't optional. It was mandatory. By the time she reached the taxi stand outside Terminal 5, news of her demands had already begun spreading among the airline staff. Whispers rippled through the ranks, growing louder with each passing hour. Some employees defended the crew, arguing that they had done nothing wrong beyond providing standard service. Others sided with Claire, acknowledging that the industry's standards needed a wake-up call. Meanwhile, back in the office, Mr. Thompson placed a frantic call to the airline's corporate headquarters. Executives scrambled to assess the situation, weighing the potential fallout of defying Claire versus the PR nightmare of firing loyal employees. It was a lose-lose scenario, but ultimately, business interests won out. By late afternoon, official notices were sent to the flight crew involved. Effective immediately, their contracts had been terminated. The ripple effects of Claire's actions were immediate and widespread. Social media erupted with reactions, as passengers who had been on the same flight shared their perspectives. Some praised Claire for standing up for quality service, while others criticized her for being overly harsh. Journalists jumped on the story, publishing articles dissecting every angle of the controversy. Labor unions representing airline workers condemned the decision, accusing Claire of wielding disproportionate power and setting a dangerous precedent. For Claire, however, the battle was only beginning. As she settled into her hotel room later that evening, she scrolled through the flood of notifications on her phone. Tweets, comments, and news headlines dominated her feed, painting conflicting pictures of heroism and villainy. She sipped a glass of red wine thoughtfully, knowing full well that her actions would spark debate for weeks to come. But even amidst the chaos, one thing was certain: Claire Bennett had made her mark. Whether admired or vilified, she had proven once again that she was a force to be reckoned with, a woman who demanded excellence and stopped at nothing to achieve it. The fallout from Claire's actions spread like wildfire, igniting conversations across social media platforms, news outlets, and even dinner tables around the world. By the time she woke up the next morning in her London hotel suite, the story had already gone viral. Her name was trending on Twitter. Hashtags like Gau Claire Bennett and Down Flight Fiasco were everywhere, and opinion pieces analyzing her decision flooded major publications. Some hailed her as a champion of high standards, while others painted her as a tyrant who wielded her power recklessly. The divide was sharp, and it seemed everyone had an opinion. As Claire sipped her morning coffee, scrolling through the endless stream of reactions on her phone, she couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. On one hand, she relished the attention. It wasn't every day that someone stood up so boldly for what they believed in, especially against a massive corporation. But on the other hand, the sheer volume of criticism gnawed at her. She hadn't expected universal praise, of course, but the vitriol surprised her. Words like bully, entitled, and over the top appeared frequently in comments, often accompanied by memes mocking her supposed arrogance. One tweet in particular caught her eye. "So now we live in a world where CEOs can fire anyone who dares to offer them food? What's next? Executives demanding apologies from baristas for misspelling their names." The comment had thousands of likes and retweets, with users chiming in to share similar stories of perceived corporate overreach. Claire frowned, setting her phone aside. Was this really how people saw her? As someone so out of touch with reality that she would destroy livelihoods over a trivial disagreement? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was room service delivering the breakfast she had ordered earlier. As the attendant wheeled in a cart laden with fresh fruit, pastries, and yogurt, Claire noticed something unusual. A small note tucked under the silver dome covering her omelet. Curious, she unfolded it and read the handwritten message. "We hope you enjoy your meal, Ms. Bennett. Excellence is our standard." For a moment, Claire felt a pang of guilt. Was this some subtle jab from the hotel staff or simply a coincidence? Either way, it reminded her of the weight of her actions. People weren't just debating her behavior. They were scrutinizing her values, her leadership style, and even her humanity. And while she prided herself on being decisive and unyielding, she also knew that true leaders didn't shy away from self-reflection. Later that day, Claire attended a panel discussion at a prestigious business conference in central London. The event brought together top executives, entrepreneurs, and innovators from various industries, all eager to exchange ideas and insights. Claire had been invited months ago to speak about navigating challenges in leadership. But now, thanks to recent events, her presence carried extra significance. Reporters hovered near the entrance, cameras clicking furiously as attendees filed into the grand hall. Claire walked in confidently, ignoring the whispers and stares, and took her seat among the panelists. When it was her turn to address the audience, Claire spoke eloquently about resilience, adaptability, and maintaining high standards in competitive markets. Her words were well received, earning nods of approval from both the panelists and the crowd. But as the session drew to a close, the moderator opened the floor for questions. A young journalist in the front row raised his hand, and when called upon, he leaned forward with a challenging glint in his eye. "Ms. Bennett," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the microphone. "Given the recent controversy surrounding your flight from New York, many are questioning whether your approach to leadership prioritizes results over compassion. Do you believe there's room for empathy in enforcing high standards? The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Claire. For a brief moment, she hesitated, weighing her response carefully. This was her chance, not just to defend herself, but to shape the narrative. Taking a deep breath, she leaned into the microphone. First, let me say this. I understand why my actions have sparked debate. Firing an entire flight crew is not something I take lightly, nor is it something I recommend as a standard practice. However, the heart of the issue isn't about meals or minor inconveniences. It's about accountability. When you pay for a premium service, you expect excellence, and when that expectation isn't met, it's not unreasonable to demand answers. She paused, scanning the audience before continuing. That said, I recognize that no system is perfect, and mistakes happen. What truly matters is how we respond to those mistakes. In this case, the airline failed to address my concerns adequately, leaving me with no choice but to escalate the matter. My goal wasn't to punish individuals. It was to send a message that mediocrity has consequences. Her response elicited murmurs of agreement from some corners of the room, though skepticism lingered in others. Sensing the need to clarify further, Claire added, "Leadership isn't just about making tough decisions. It's also about learning from them. While I stand by my actions, I acknowledge that there may be more constructive ways to drive change. That's something I'll carry with me moving forward." The audience erupted into applause, and Claire allowed herself a small smile. Whether or not everyone agreed with her stance, she had succeeded in reframing the conversation. Instead of defending her decision outright, she had positioned herself as someone willing to evolve, a leader who valued growth as much as results. Outside the conference hall, reporters swarmed her, eager for sound bites. Cameras flashed relentlessly as Claire navigated the throng, repeating variations of her earlier statement. Accountability is key, she emphasized repeatedly, but so is learning from our choices. Her polished responses fueled new headlines, shifting the tone of the discourse slightly. Articles began appearing with titles like "Claire Bennett Speaks Out," "Leadership Lessons from the Flight Controversy," and "Can Tough Decisions Coexist with Empathy?" Meanwhile, the backlash continued to grow within the aviation industry. Labor unions representing flight attendants issued scathing statements, accusing Claire of undermining workers' rights and perpetuating toxic workplace cultures. One union organizer went so far as to organize a protest outside Heathrow Airport, holding a sign that read, "Excellence starts with respect for everyone." Passengers joined the demonstration, sharing stories of their own frustrating encounters with airlines, though few could match the drama of Claire's ordeal. Back at the airline's headquarters, executives scrambled to contain the damage. The public relations teams worked around the clock to craft statements that balanced accountability with compassion, emphasizing their commitment to improving service without alienating employees. Internally, however, morale plummeted. Many flight attendants expressed fear of losing their jobs over minor infractions, while others questioned whether working in first class was worth the stress and scrutiny. Despite the chaos, Claire remained unfazed. She knew better than most that controversy came with the territory of being a public figure. What mattered now was how she responded, not just to the criticism, but to the broader implications of her actions. As she prepared for her next meeting later that evening, she jotted down notes for an idea that had been brewing in her mind since the panel discussion. Perhaps there was a way to turn this situation into an opportunity, not just for herself but for others. That night, after hours of deliberation, Claire drafted a press release announcing the launch of a mentorship program aimed at supporting displaced airline workers. Funded by her company, the initiative would provide training, resources, and career guidance to help former employees transition into new roles within the industry or beyond. Mistakes should lead to growth, not punishment, the statement read. This program reflects our belief in second chances and our commitment to fostering excellence through collaboration. The announcement sent shockwaves through the media landscape once again. Supporters praised Claire for taking responsibility and offering a tangible solution, while critics dismissed the move as a calculated attempt to salvage her image. Regardless of the mixed reactions, one thing was clear. Claire Bennett had once again proven herself to be a master strategist, capable of turning even the harshest criticism into an opportunity for reinvention. As she turned off her laptop and climbed into bed, Claire reflected on the whirlwind of events. Had she acted too harshly? Perhaps. But in her mind, the real test lay ahead, not in defending her past decisions, but in shaping a future where accountability and empathy coexisted. And if there was one thing Claire excelled at, it was rising to a challenge. The days following Claire's announcement of the mentorship program brought a whirlwind of activity. News outlets dissected every detail of her plan, from its ambitious scope to its potential impact on the aviation industry. Social media buzzed with reactions. Some praised her for stepping up and addressing the fallout constructively, while others dismissed it as a PR stunt designed to polish her tarnished image. But amidst the noise, one thing stood out. People were talking. Not just about Claire Bennett, but about the broader issues her actions had highlighted: accountability, empathy, and the delicate balance between high standards and human dignity. Claire herself remained laser-focused. She knew that launching the mentorship program wasn't enough. She needed to ensure it succeeded. Over the next few weeks, she immersed herself in planning sessions with her team, collaborating with industry experts, career coaches, and former airline employees to design a curriculum that would genuinely make a difference. The program would offer workshops on communication skills, conflict resolution, and stress management, tools that could benefit workers across all levels of the aviation sector. It would also include personalized mentoring, helping participants navigate career transitions or explore new opportunities entirely. To kick things off, Claire hosted a press conference in London, inviting journalists, union representatives, and aviation professionals to hear her vision firsthand. Dressed in a sleek black suit, she stepped onto the stage with confidence, her presence commanding attention even before she spoke. As cameras clicked and reporters scribbled notes, she began by acknowledging the controversy that had sparked the initiative. "I'll be the first to admit," she said, her voice steady and sincere, "that my response to the events on Flight 472 was harsh. I acted out of frustration, yes, but also out of a desire to hold people accountable for excellence. In hindsight, I realized that accountability doesn't mean discarding individuals. It means empowering them to grow." Her words struck a chord. For many in the audience, this marked a rare moment of vulnerability from someone known for her unshakable composure. Claire went on to outline the specifics of the mentorship program, emphasizing its focus on creating pathways for success rather than punishment. "This isn't about fixing what happened," she continued. "It's about building something better. If we want industries like aviation to thrive, we need to invest in the people who keep them running. That starts with education, support, and second chances." When she finished speaking, the room erupted into applause. Reporters rushed to ask questions, their tone noticeably softer than before. One asked how she planned to fund such an ambitious project, to which Claire responded matter-of-factly, "Every dollar spent on this program is an investment, not just in these individuals but in the future of our workforce. My company has the resources and I have the responsibility to use them wisely." Another reporter raised a more pointed question. "Do you think this program will repair your reputation after the backlash you faced?" Claire smiled faintly, her expression thoughtful. "Reputation is fleeting," she replied. "What matters is impact. If this program helps even one person find their footing again, then it's worth every effort." As the press conference wrapped up, Claire felt a sense of clarity wash over her. For the first time since the incident, she didn't feel weighed down by criticism or self-doubt. Instead, she felt energized, motivated not by the need to defend herself, but by the opportunity to create meaningful change. Over the coming months, the mentorship program gained traction. Former flight attendants and crew members from various airlines enrolled, eager to learn new skills and rebuild their careers. Testimonials poured in, highlighting stories of transformation. One participant, a former first-class attendant named Sarah, shared her journey during a televised interview. "I lost my job because of what happened with Ms. Bennett," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "At first, I hated her. But when I heard about this program, I decided to give it a shot. Now I'm training to become a customer experience consultant. I never thought I'd say this, but thank you, Claire. Sarah's story resonated deeply, capturing the hearts of viewers worldwide. It became a symbol of redemption, a reminder that even the most contentious situations could lead to growth if approached with intention and compassion. Claire watched the interview from her office, her eyes glistening with pride. She hadn't expected gratitude, but hearing Sarah's words reinforced her belief in the power of second chances. Behind the scenes, Claire worked tirelessly to expand the program's reach. She partnered with universities, nonprofits, and government agencies to provide scholarships and job placement assistance. She traveled extensively, meeting with participants and listening to their feedback. Each interaction reminded her of why she had started this journey, to prove that leadership wasn't just about making tough decisions. It was about fostering environments where everyone could succeed. Despite the program's success, Claire remained acutely aware of the scrutiny she still faced. Critics continued to question her motives, accusing her of using philanthropy to distract from her initial misstep. At times, the negativity wore on her, but she refused to let it derail her progress. Instead, she channeled her energy into proving them wrong, showing through action that her commitment to improvement was genuine. One evening, as she sat alone in her hotel room after a long day of meetings, Claire reflected on everything that had transpired. From the tense interactions aboard Flight 472 to the global debate that followed, she had weathered storms she never anticipated. Yet, through it all, she had emerged stronger, not despite the challenges, but because of them. She picked up her journal, a habit she had maintained since childhood, and began writing. Her pen moved swiftly across the page, capturing thoughts that had been swirling in her mind for weeks. True leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about recognizing imperfection in ourselves and in the systems we operate within, and striving to do better. I made mistakes, I acted out of frustration, but I also learned, and sometimes learning means changing course, even when it's hard. Closing the journal, Claire allowed herself a rare moment of quiet satisfaction. She knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth. There would be setbacks, criticisms, and moments of doubt. But she also knew that growth rarely came without discomfort. What mattered most was how she chose to respond, to rise above the noise, stay true to her values, and continue pushing for excellence, not just for herself, but for those around her. Months later, Claire stood on stage at an international leadership summit, accepting an award for corporate social responsibility. As she accepted the trophy, she took a deep breath and addressed the audience. "They say adversity reveals character," she began, her voice ringing clear and strong. "But I believe it shapes it. Every challenge we face is an opportunity to grow, to redefine who we are and what we stand for. Today, I accept this honor not as an endpoint, but as a reminder that our work is never done. Let's keep striving for excellence, for empathy, and for a world where everyone has the chance to soar." The crowd rose to their feet, applauding thunderously. Claire smiled, her gaze sweeping across the room. For the first time in a long while, she felt at peace. She had proven that even the toughest decisions could lead to brighter futures, if approached with courage, humility, and a willingness to evolve. And as she walked off stage, she knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning.